Tuesday morning in April. My daughter-in-law sat across from me at my own kitchen table, the one my husband refinished with his bare hands the summer before he got sick, and told me I was a lot to manage. I was 63 years old. I had worked 31 years as a licensed practical nurse at St. Augustine Medical Center in Memphis, Tennessee. I had held the hands of dying strangers at 3 in the morning so their families could sleep. I had raised 2 children mostly alone while my husband fought his way back from a back injury that took 4 years and nearly took him with it. I had kept every light on in that house, every bill paid, every refrigerator full. A lot to manage. Her name was Kristen. She was 29, from Scottsdale, Arizona, the kind of pretty that photographs well and wears out in real life. She worked in brand partnerships, which meant companies sent her things for free in exchange for posting pictures of herself using them. She had 340,000 followers and an opinion about everything except the things that actually mattered. My son Travis had married her 14 months earlier in a ceremony that cost $42,000, 20 of which he had borrowed from me without asking, just transferred from my checking account after I'd foolishly added him as a joint holder for emergencies. I'd found out when my bank statement came, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, or rather, the beginning of the end. My husband Eugene died on September 11th, 2021. Prostate cancer that spread before anyone caught it. The particular cruelty of a disease that moves quietly until it doesn't. We had 37 years together. 37 years in the house on Beechwood Drive, a 4-bedroom colonial that we bought for $82,000 in 1994, and that was worth, by the time he passed, somewhere around $410,000. Eugene was not a dramatic man. He did not make speeches. He showed love by fixing things. The leaking faucet, the screen door that never closed right, the section of porch railing that wobbled every winter. When he was sick and couldn't fix anything anymore, he would sit on the porch in his good chair and supervise while I tried, and he'd say, "Little to the left, Addie. No, your other left." And we'd both laugh, and it was the best sound in the world. He died at home, the way he wanted, on a Friday, with me beside him and our daughter Camille on the phone from Seattle because she couldn't get a flight in time. Travis was there. He held his father's hand at the end. And I remember thinking, this is the son I raised. This is who he is underneath everything. I was wrong about that, or maybe I was right and he just changed. I still don't know which is worse. For the first year after Eugene passed, I lived alone in the house on Beechwood Drive. The silence was the hardest part. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that reminds you of everything missing. I left the television on. I cooked full dinners for one person and ate half, and put the rest in the refrigerator, and threw it away 3 days later. I kept Eugene's reading glasses on the nightstand for 8 months before I could move them. Travis called every Sunday. He seemed concerned. He asked the right questions. He said, "Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around that big house alone." He said it so many times I started to believe him. In November 2022, he asked if he and Kristen could stay with me temporarily. They'd been renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Nashville, but the lease was ending and they were saving aggressively for a house of their own. Just 3 or 4 months, he said. Maybe through the spring. I said yes. I said yes because I was lonely, and because he was my son, and because I genuinely believed it would be 3 or 4 months. They arrived on December 2nd, 2022 with a moving truck. Not boxes, a moving truck. Kristen had a vanity setup that required its own dedicated electrical outlet. She had a wardrobe that took up the entire guest room closet and then some. She had opinions about my throw pillows. Within the first week, she had rearranged my living room for flow while I was at my Thursday morning water aerobics class. My grandmother's side table, solid cherry wood, brought up from Mississippi by my mother, carved with little flowers along the legs, had been moved to the garage because it clashed with the neutral palette she was going for. I moved it back. She moved it out again the next day while I was grocery shopping. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. Instead, I cooked. I cooked the way my mother taught me, the way I'd always cooked, slow and with intention. Red beans and rice on Mondays, fried catfish on Fridays, cornbread that had to rest before you cut it, banana pudding with real vanilla wafers layered by hand. Travis ate like a man who'd been starving. Kristen took pictures of the food, captioned them things like Southern Comfort for her followers, and then ordered a salad from DoorDash. Once I made a pot of oxtail stew that took 2 days. I started the bones the night before, skimmed the fat in the morning, added the vegetables in the afternoon, and let it reduce until the gravy was so thick a spoon could stand up in it. It was Eugene's favorite. I made it on what would have been our 38th anniversary. Kristen took 3 photos of it, posted one, and told me she couldn't do red meat right now because she was in a reset phase. She poured it into a to-go container and left it on the counter for me to deal with. Travis said nothing. He was sitting right there and he said nothing. The changes kept coming, the way water damage spreads. You don't notice it until the ceiling starts to sag. My home office, where I kept Eugene's woodworking files and my own nursing paperwork and the family photo albums, became Kristen's content room. A ring light appeared. A rolling rack of clothes appeared. A white, seamless backdrop appeared and went floor to ceiling along the wall where I had hung 30 years of school photos of my children. My grandchildren's first birthday pictures. The framed snapshot from Travis's college graduation, where Eugene was beaming like he personally hung the sun. Those photos went to a banker's box in the hall closet. I moved them back, she moved them out again. I stopped moving them back. I noticed I was eating breakfast earlier and earlier to avoid being in the kitchen when Kristen did her morning filming. I noticed I had stopped inviting my friend Wanda over on Wednesday evenings because Kristen needed the downstairs quiet and neutral for a live stream she did at 7. I noticed that the house smelled different. Some cedar and eucalyptus diffuser Kristen ran constantly that gave me headaches, and that my own home no longer smelled like my home. I noticed all of this and I told myself it was temporary. Then one afternoon in October, 8 months into their stay, I was pulling weeds in my garden in the backyard. Eugene's raised beds, the ones he built himself the summer after he retired, when I heard Kristen on the phone inside the kitchen. The window above the sink was open. "No, it's basically free," she was saying. "She does all the cooking, which whatever, but we're not paying rent or utilities or anything." I know. I know. The vibe isn't great, but Travis says she won't be there much longer anyway. She's getting older, you know. We've been looking at some places. There's an independent living community out in Germantown that he thinks she'd like. Very nice, he says. Lots of women her age. I'm thinking we could have the whole upstairs redone by spring. Open the wall between the master and the guest room. There's actually great bones in this house. I stayed very still in the garden. There was a robin in Eugene's tomato bed doing what robins do. The late October light was the color of good bourbon. Very nice, he says. Lots of women her age. I was 63 years old. I worked out 4 days a week. I still had my nursing license. I volunteered at the free medical clinic on Saturdays. I had a full life, full friends, a full mind. I walked inside, washed my hands at the laundry room sink so I wouldn't have to walk through the kitchen, went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on Eugene's side of the bed. I did not cry. I had learned not to cry before I had a plan. 2 things happened in the weeks that followed. The first was that I found the letter. I had never gone through Eugene's filing cabinet, not properly, not all the way through. It felt like trespassing. But in early November, I finally made myself sit down and do it, folder by folder, the way a nurse approaches a difficult task, steadily and without looking away. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind a hanging folder labeled MISC and stuffed with old appliance manuals, was a manila envelope with my name on it in Eugene's handwriting. Inside was a letter and a smaller envelope marked Open Second. The letter was 3 pages written on yellow legal pad paper, the same kind he used for lumber estimates. Adelaide, it started. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you probably waited too long, knowing you. You always did think you could will things back into working order. I love that about you, and it drove me crazy for 37 years. I need you to listen to me right now. There is money you don't know about. I sat on the floor of the bedroom. The light came through the curtains in long yellow bars. Eugene wrote that after his back injury, the 4 years of surgeries and workers' comp, and the long dark period I never talked about publicly, he had become afraid. Afraid of being a burden. Afraid of leaving me with nothing. He had started quietly, putting money away the moment he went back to work. He never told me because he said he knew himself. If I knew, we'd have found a reason to spend it. He opened an account in his name alone at a credit union across town from our regular bank. For 22 years, he deposited money. Work bonuses, overtime, the savings from lunches he didn't buy, the fishing trips he canceled because he said he'd rather be home. He put some in a whole life insurance policy I hadn't known about. He bought 2 certificates of deposit that had rolled over quietly for years. He had a pension from the manufacturing company he'd worked for before the injury, a small one that had been accruing. The second envelope held account numbers, policy numbers, and a note that said, "Talk to James Okafor at Riverside Credit Union. Tell him your name. He knows to expect you." I sat there on the floor for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and started making calls. I met with James Okafor 3 days later, on a Wednesday, while Travis and Kristen were at a brand trip in Savannah. James was a careful, soft-spoken Igbo-American man in his 60s who had worked with Eugene for years. He had a box of tissues on his desk and a photograph of his own wife and children on the credenza behind him. "Mrs. Adelaide," he said, "Eugene had apparently always called me that. Your husband was one of the most disciplined men I've ever worked with. He came in twice a year for 22 years, never missed." The savings account held $114,000. The whole life insurance policy had a death benefit of $600,000, with a cash value that had grown to just over $140,000. I was the sole beneficiary. I had not known it existed. The 2 CDs, rolled over and compounded, held together $67,000. The small pension, which I had also not known about, paid $900 a month, and had been paying since his death into an account I hadn't accessed. I asked James to add it up. With the death benefit, the savings, the CDs, and 14 months of pension deposits I hadn't collected, $980,000 plus $900 a month going forward, close to $1 million. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. Eugene had worried about leaving me with nothing, and instead he had left me with everything. 22 years of quiet love in the form of a number I could barely hold in my mind. The second thing that happened was that Travis asked me to sign papers. He brought them home on a Saturday in November, set them on the kitchen table, got me a cup of coffee I didn't ask for, and sat down in the chair across from me with an expression I recognized from when he was 17 and had wrecked the car. "Mom," he said, "I've been talking to a financial planner, about the future, about making things simpler." I looked at the papers. They were a quitclaim deed, transferring the house on Beechwood Drive to Travis Eugene Hampton, sole owner. "It's a tax thing," he said, "estate planning. If the house is in my name now, it avoids probate later, makes everything cleaner when, you know, you'd still live here, obviously. Nothing changes." I was not an educated fool. 31 years in medicine had taught me to read documents carefully, to understand that the words "obviously" and "nothing changes" appear most reliably when things are about to change significantly. But I was also sitting in my kitchen watching my son look at me with that expression, and I thought about the boy who used to fall asleep in the car on long drives and go boneless in my arms when I carried him inside. I thought about how much he looked like Eugene around the eyes. I signed the papers. I signed them, and I already knew, somewhere I couldn't fully admit yet, that I had made a mistake. April arrived. By then they'd been in my house for 16 months. Travis had a new job, sales director at a logistics company, and was traveling several days a week. Kristen was home more, which meant I was home less. I found myself inventing reasons to leave: longer shifts at the clinic, extra water aerobics classes, long drives to nowhere. The morning of April 8th, I came downstairs at 6:30 to make my coffee and found Kristen already at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a color printout in her hand. She didn't look up immediately. She let me make my coffee. She let me sit down. Then she folded her hands on top of the printout and said, "Adelaide, Travis and I have been talking a lot about the living situation." I noticed she never called me Mom, not once in 16 months. "The thing is," she said, and her voice had that particular warmth that means the opposite of warmth, "Travis and I are at a really important stage in our lives, building something. And we need to do that in our own space, our own home. Without," she paused, "without divided energy." Divided energy. "This is your home," I said. "Technically," she said, and slid the color printout across the table to me. It was a brochure for a place called Harmony Gardens Senior Living in Germantown. Private studios and one bedrooms, a dining room that looked like an airport hotel, a recreation room with a ping pong table. The reviews are wonderful. There's a waiting list, but Travis made some calls and they have availability starting June 1st. That gives you almost 2 months. I looked at the brochure. I looked at the woman across from me. 2 months, I said. We'd help with the move, she said. Of course. I thought about Kristen's mother, who visited twice a year and stayed in what used to be my office, which was now a content room, and who called me Travis's mom the one time we were introduced. I thought about the oxtail stew. I thought about Eugene's side table in the garage. I thought about 31 years of walking into hospitals at 5 a.m. and never once failing a patient. I need to think, I said. Kristen nodded with great understanding. Of course, take a few days. She picked up her laptop and walked upstairs, and I sat there with my coffee and listened to the house, my house, Eugene's house, the house where both my children had learned to walk, and I made myself a promise. I was done being manageable. I did not take a few days, I took 2 hours, then I drove to the offices of Patricia Drummond, an estate and elder law attorney whose name I'd gotten from James Okafor. Patricia Drummond was 61, black, and had the kind of stillness that comes from having heard every variety of family disaster. She read the quitclaim deed I'd brought. She read it twice. Tell me the whole story, she said. I told her the whole story. She listened without expression until I finished. Mrs. Hampton, she said, I want you to understand something clearly. In Tennessee, a quitclaim deed signed under undue influence or without full understanding of its implications can be challenged. You signed this while grieving, while being pressured by someone who had a financial interest in the outcome, and potentially without full disclosure of what you were signing away. We have options. She also explained that under Tennessee law, even with the deed transfer, I retained certain rights as an occupant, particularly if I had paid household expenses that constituted de facto rent. She would need documentation. Did I have bank records? I had every bank record going back 12 years. I am a nurse. We document everything. Good, Patricia said. She tapped her pen on the desk. Now, what do you want? I thought about that for a moment. I want to sell the house, I said, and I want to move to Lisbon, Portugal. Patricia didn't blink. Then let's make that happen. I did not tell Travis and Kristen anything. I became the most agreeable person they had ever encountered. I told Kristen I called Harmony Gardens and the tour was scheduled. I told Travis I was warming up to the idea. I left the Harmony Gardens brochure on my nightstand where anyone walking by could see it. Meanwhile, I was doing other things. I filed the life insurance claim. $600,000, processed in 21 business days. I contacted the credit union and consolidated accounts. I spoke to a financial advisor named Randolph Webb, a referral from Patricia, who specialized in international retirement planning. Lisbon, he said, reviewing the numbers. Good choice. High quality of life, favorable tax treatment for foreign retirees under the NHR regime, affordable by Western European standards. With what you have, you could buy outright or rent very comfortably. You'd never need to touch your principal. I'd spent 63 years being careful. I had clipped coupons and bought store-brand aspirin and worked double shifts when Travis needed braces. I had never once in my adult life bought anything purely because I wanted it. I called a relocation consultant named Diana Ferreira, who had moved from Atlanta to Lisbon 11 years earlier and ran an expat assistance service. We video called 3 times. She sent me virtual tours of neighborhoods. Estrella, Principe Real, Belém. She told me what things cost, what the healthcare was like, how to get a D7 passive income visa. I told her I could be ready by July. She said, I'll have everything waiting. I called a real estate agent named Howard Gibbs who specialized in estate sales. He walked through the house on a Tuesday morning and shook his head slowly, the way people do when something is better than expected. Mrs. Hampton, he said, in this market with this square footage and the neighborhood comps, I'd list at $425. You'll have offers within 10 days. Cash buyers only, I said. I want to close by June 15th. He looked at me for a moment. You're sure about this? Very sure, I said. I listed the house off market on May 3rd. The first showing was May 8th. A young couple. She was a pediatric physical therapist. He taught high school history. They walked through slowly and carefully, the way people do when they're imagining their actual life inside something. In the kitchen, she ran her hand along the counter where I'd rolled out 1,000 pie crusts. "This feels like a real home," she said to him. "It is," I said. "It's been one for 30 years." They offered full asking price the next morning. We signed it the same afternoon. Travis and Kristen came home from Nashville on May 10th. I'd made dinner, roasted chicken thighs with preserved lemon, rice, green beans with almonds, the kind of dinner that smells like a home. Travis ate 2 plates. Kristen photographed her portion, captioned it something about homestyle goodness, and ate a few bites. After dinner, I said, "I've made some decisions I want to share with you both." Travis looked up. "I've decided not to go to Harmony Gardens," I said. Kristen exhaled with poorly concealed relief. Travis started to smile. "I found somewhere that suits me better." I folded my napkin. "I'm moving to Lisbon, Portugal on July 12th. I leave from Memphis International at 6 a.m. The smile on Travis's face did something complicated. "I've also accepted an offer on this house," I said. "It sells June 15th. The buyers are lovely. She's a therapist, he's a teacher. They want to fill it with children." Kristen set down her fork. "Constance," she started, "my name is Adelaide." She had called me the wrong name. "The legal paperwork was reviewed by my attorney," I said calmly. "The quitclaim deed has complications that favor my position considerably. You're welcome to speak with your own lawyer. I'd recommend doing that soon, because you have 35 days. Travis found his voice. "Mom, you can't sell this house. It was your father's house," I said. "And before you say anything else, I want you to understand that your father spent 22 years making sure I would never have to depend on anyone's permission to live my own life. He did that quietly, without ever telling me, because he knew I would have talked him out of it. He knew me that well." My voice was steady. I was proud of it. "He left me close to $1 million, Travis. He left me the ability to do exactly this. And you had no idea because you weren't looking at me. You were looking at what you thought you could get." The kitchen was very quiet. Travis looked the way he'd looked at 18 when I'd found out about the car. But this time I felt no impulse to smooth it over. "Where are you supposed to stay?" Kristen asked. Her voice was different now. Smaller. "That," I said, "is exactly the question I've been sitting with for 16 months. I left them at the table and drove to Wanda's house, where she'd made sweet potato pie and poured us both a glass of Malbec, and I told her everything. She cried. I didn't. Not then. I was still too wired, too precise, the way you get after a long shift when everything has gone both terribly and exactly right. "You're actually leaving," Wanda said. "I'm actually leaving." She raised her glass. "Eugene saw this day coming. He built a door before I knew I needed one," I said. Travis and Kristen were out of the house by June 12th, 3 days before closing. Travis left a note on the kitchen counter. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Call me when you're ready." No apology from Kristen. No note at all from her. The closing was June 15th, a Monday. I wore the navy blazer I used to wear to nursing administration meetings. Howard handed me a check for $408,000, $425 minus his commission and closing costs. I walked out into the Memphis summer, into the heavy wet heat I'd lived inside my whole life, and stood on the sidewalk with that check in my hand. Eugene had built me a door. I had walked through it. July 12th, the Uber came at 4 a.m. My neighbor Wanda was on her porch in her bathrobe. She was not a crier usually, and she was crying. "You call me when you land," she said. "First thing," I said. "And if it's not paradise, you come home." "It'll be paradise," I said, "and this will still be home. They're not mutually exclusive." I flew Memphis to JFK, JFK to Lisbon. Business class, because Diana had said, "You are 63 years old and you are flying overnight across an ocean, and you have earned a flat seat." She was right. I slept for 4 hours somewhere over the Atlantic and woke up to the pilot announcing our descent. Diana was at arrivals with a sign that said, "Adelaide" in capital letters, and a smile that felt like being welcomed. The apartment was in Principe Real, a neighborhood of tile work and tall windows and streets that smelled like roasting chestnuts and coffee. Third floor of a 19th century building, wooden floors the color of honey, tile in the kitchen that had been there since 1927, a small terrace that looked out over rooftops to a sliver of the river. I stood on that terrace the first evening and drank a glass of wine and watched the light go pink and then gold, and then the deep blue of the Atlantic dusk, and I thought about Eugene sitting on our porch in Memphis in his good chair, supervising while I fixed things, saying your other left, Addie. I've said his name out loud to nobody, or maybe to him. I'm not sure anymore that there's a difference. The first month was Portuguese lessons 3 mornings a week, long walks in which I got thoroughly lost and then found, and the careful work of building a life inside a new place. My knee-jerk fear of ordering wrong at restaurants, the glorious revelation that I could sit in a cafe for 2 hours with a coffee and a book, and nobody would look at me sideways about it. I joined a walking group, mostly retirees from various countries, convened weekly by a semi-retired Dutch architect named Franz who carried a city map he never actually consulted. We walked and talked and ate lunch at places he knew, and they were the easiest friendships I had made since Eugene died. Diana introduced me to a group of Black American women, 6 of us, expats at various stages of our Lisbon lives. We had dinner once a month at someone's home, everyone bringing food from their past: collard greens, jerk chicken, black-eyed peas, groundnut stew. At my second dinner, I made Eugene's cornbread, the cast-iron skillet kind, with the crust that crackled, and a pot of red beans and rice with andouille I'd found at a specialty grocer. A woman named Frederica, who'd been in Lisbon for 9 years, took a bite of the cornbread and said, "Oh, honey, you have to teach me this." "It's easy," I said. "You just have to trust the pan." Travis called in October, 3 months after I left. I was on a walk along the river when my phone rang, and I saw his name. I answered. "Mom," he said. His voice sounded like a man who had been carrying something heavy. "I need to start with 'I'm sorry.' Not because I want anything, not to ask you back or to fix anything between us right now. Just because I'm sorry and you deserve to hear it clearly." I stopped walking. A tram went by behind me. "I'm listening," I said. He talked for a long time. He talked about therapy. Twice a week, a therapist in Nashville who specialized in family systems. He talked about what he'd started to understand about how he'd seen me as a resource rather than a person, as a given. He talked about his father. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad," he said, "about what he actually did for you all those years and how I had no idea. And I keep wondering, if I paid attention to that, to what it looks like when you actually love someone, would I have turned into someone different?" His voice broke a little. "I keep thinking I had the right example right in front of me, and I didn't use it." I watched the river go by, the Tagus, older than everything, wide and silver. "Travis," I said, "your father was not a perfect man. He was a man who made a choice every day to try to do right by me. That's all it is. It's a choice. I made the wrong ones." "You did," I said, "and you can make different ones from here." "Is there a here?" he asked. Is there something left?" I thought about Wanda crying on her porch. I thought about the morning I'd opened that manila envelope on the floor of the bedroom. Eugene's handwriting in the yellow bar of light. "Come visit in January," I said. "Give me the fall to settle in. Come in January, and come alone, and come ready to just see me. Not fix anything, not apologize 17 times. Just see me." "I'll be there," he said. "I promise." He kept the promise. He arrived on a Thursday evening, thinner, different around the eyes, more careful somehow, like a man who'd learned that things can break. I picked him up at the airport, and we drove back along the river road, and he was quiet for most of it, looking out at the water. At the apartment, he stood on the terrace for a long time. "Mom," he said finally, "this is—" He stopped. "Dad would have loved this." "I know," I said. "That's partly why I'm here." We had 4 days. I showed him the neighborhood, the cafe where I took my morning coffee, the market on Saturdays, the hilltop where you could see the whole city, and the river. And on clear days, the bridge that looked like it was made from a San Francisco postcard. We walked. We ate. We talked about Eugene. Really talked about him, the whole story. The way I'd never quite told Travis before. On the third night, Travis said, "What did you feel when you found out about the money?" "I felt like he'd been watching over me the whole time," I said. "Like he'd known something I didn't know about how things would go, and he built a way out before I needed it. He protected you from me, Travis said quietly. Even though I was his son, he knew. He protected me from anyone who might need protecting against, I said. I don't think he knew it would be you specifically. I think he just knew I was the kind of woman who would give too much for too long before I'd let myself have anything. Travis was quiet for a while. Are you happy? He asked. Like actually happy. Not surviving happy, really? I thought about the mornings on the terrace with coffee, the river going silver in the light, the walking group, Frederica's laugh, the Portuguese lessons where I was, frankly, mediocre but improving, the Saturday clinics I'd started volunteering at for English-speaking expats who needed medical guidance in a country where they didn't speak the language. 31 years of nursing, turns out, travels. Yes, I said, I'm actually happy. He nodded like that was both the answer he wanted and the one that cost him something. Good, he said. That's good. I'm 64 now, nearly 65. I have lived in Lisbon for 14 months. My liquid assets, carefully managed by Randolph, have grown to just over $1.1 million. I live on the pension and investment income, about $78,000 a year, and I have not touched my principal. I own my apartment outright. I bought it 8 months in for 340,000 euros. Travis visits quarterly. He met someone, a woman named Claire who teaches at Vanderbilt and has the patience of a saint, and apparently saw something in him worth developing. I have not met her yet, but we video called twice, and she made me laugh both times. I take that seriously. Kristen got engaged to someone in Phoenix. Travis sent me the notification with a one-word text. Onward. I sent back a thumbs up and then felt like that was the exact right level of response. Wanda visited in March, and we spent a week being tourists together, and eating everything and staying up too late on the terrace with wine. And on her last night she said, Eugene knew exactly what he was doing. He usually did, I said. He built you a whole other life, she said, just in case. I keep his reading glasses on the nightstand still. Different nightstand, different country, same glasses. Some things you don't put away just because you've moved on. Moving on doesn't have to mean leaving everything behind. That's something I'm still figuring out. How to carry the people you love with you when you build something new. How to let grief and joy be in the same house without one evicting the other. I still work, not nursing shifts. My days of 12-hour nights are behind me, and I have made my peace with that. But the Saturday expat clinic, and a new thing I started 2 months ago. A community health workshop for the African diaspora women in our group. Basic preventive care. Knowing what to ask your Portuguese doctor. How to navigate the system. 6 women showed up the first week. 14 showed up last week. I am 64 years old, and I have more work that matters than I know what to do with. The memoir is at 90 pages. I haven't decided what to call it yet. In my kitchen in Prevails, there is a cast iron skillet that was my grandmother's. The one I used to make cornbread. The one I carried in my checked luggage from Memphis to Lisbon, because there was no version of my new life that didn't include it. On Sunday mornings, I make cornbread, and sometimes Frederica comes over, and we drink coffee and sit on the terrace and watch the city wake up. She asked me once what I'd do if I could go back, knowing everything. I told her I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't undo a single year of what I had with Eugene, not even the hard ones. Maybe especially not the hard ones. Because the hard ones were when I learned what I was made of. But there is something I would do differently, one thing. I would open the box sooner. I would trust what he left me before I needed it to survive. I would know my own value while it was still early enough to be a luxury rather than a rescue. He built me a door. I would have walked through it while he was still alive to see me on the other side. That's the thing about the people who love you best. They don't just love you now. They love you into the future. They believe you deserve. They build for the version of you they can already see, even when you can't see her yourself. Eugene saw her. He saved for her. He wrote her a letter and put it in the back of a filing cabinet and trusted she would find it. She did. She's here. She's home. I think about that phrase a lot now, a lot to manage, and how it was meant to make me feel small. Standing in my own kitchen, in the house Eugene and I bought before my son was old enough to have an opinion about anything, and being told that my presence was a logistical problem. What Kristen didn't know. What neither of them knew was that every action has a weight to it, not in any mystical sense, just in the plain, observable way that life works. What you put out tends to come back around, and what you build or destroy tends to outlast the moment you made the choice. They chose to treat me like a piece of furniture to be repositioned. That choice had consequences they hadn't thought through because they weren't really thinking about me at all. And that's the thing about treating a person as a given. You stop accounting for them as someone capable of surprising you. Eugene understood something they didn't. He understood that doing right by someone, quietly, consistently, without needing credit for it, is its own kind of intelligence. He didn't make speeches, he made deposits. For 22 years, he made small, careful choices that added up to something that would protect me long after he was gone. That is what it looks like when your values and your actions are actually the same thing, not performing goodness, being it. I spent a lot of years being good in ways that nobody saw, working night shifts, keeping the lights on, letting things go that I should have said something about. I don't regret most of it, but I did make the mistake of confusing kindness with compliance. I let people redefine my home, my schedule, my space, and I told myself it was love when really it was avoidance. Real moral clarity, I've learned, isn't just about how you treat others. It's also about whether you're honest about what's being done to you and whether you have the integrity to respond to it truthfully. The moment I sat on that bedroom floor reading Eugene's letter, something shifted. Not rage, though that came too, briefly. Something clearer than rage, a kind of understanding that I had options I hadn't let myself see, and that seeing them now was not too late. That is the work of the mind, that shift. Taking what you know, what you've quietly observed and filed away, and letting yourself actually act on it. I had known for months that something was wrong. What changed was that I stopped talking myself out of what I already understood. And then the hardest part, doing it, not just knowing and not just deciding, but actually picking up the phone, sitting across from Patricia Drummond with 30 years of bank records, listing the house, buying the plane ticket. Each one of those steps was terrifying in its own quiet way. Courage is not the absence of fear. I've told patients that for 30 years, and I believe it even more now. It's the willingness to keep moving when you're afraid, because staying still has finally become the more frightening option. Travis is learning all of this too, slower and harder than I did. The way children usually learn the things their parents already know. I don't hold that against him. People grow on their own schedule. When the pain of not growing becomes greater than the discomfort of changing, what matters is that he's doing the work. I wake up now in Principiral with the smell of espresso coming up from the street below, and I think, Eugene built me a door. I finally walked through it. And on the other side was not a consolation prize for surviving something difficult. It was just my life, the one I'd earned and the one he believed I deserved. That's enough. That's more than enough.